hear from the fan base? You guys hear a lot in regards to what the mood and the vibe is, and obviously, once they step on the field for game number one, they're not going to be satisfied unless it's 50-0 every week until they play a decent team. Then they'll be satisfied with a 3-touchdown win. But during the off season, with the coaching change, with the quarterback change, with what's happened the last 2 years, where you could look at the bright side being, hey, we were good enough to be a playoff team, we just weren't selected. Or no, look at that awful Iowa and Purdue games, and the awful defensive display most of the season, we weren't good enough. And even though that's still elite top 5 status, it's not, we're Ohio State. We don't want to be behind anybody, Clemson or Alabama or otherwise. What comments come back at you guys generally? I'm sure they're all over the map, but in regards to where this fan base is with this program, I would think it's overwhelmingly positive, reasonably, but they're not always reasonable.
That's a good point. I've got a survey coming up looking at recruiting and kind of the 4 classes that were mixed to join this team for 2019. If you re-rank the top 25 teams, it'd be Alabama number 1 and Ohio State number 2. And I don't have it here in front of me, but Ohio State was tied with somebody else for number 2, and it's not Clemson. Clemson would come in at number 8 in terms of the most talented team in terms of recruiting rankings, at least in the last 4 years. So that maybe Georgia. I think it's Georgia would be tied for second as well. So there's a reason why these teams are at the top, and I think that the fans who follow Ohio State closely have nothing really to complain about, because the coaches, whether it was Urban Meyer and his assistants or Ryan Day and his assistants, have done the work on the front end to assemble a team that puts you in position to contend for the national championship. Now, if you get the fortunate bounce, if everything kind of goes your way, you can now put yourself into the playoff and have a legitimate chance to win the national championship. But the fans honestly have nothing to be upset about or wary about. I mean, I guess maybe they're a little gun shy because, to throw your support behind a team. But, again, Big Ten champions 2 years in a row, 13 wins last season, have beaten Michigan 7 years in a row. There's a lot of positives there if you want to look for them. And again, as I said, the coaches have positioned the program to compete and win a national championship. It's just now a matter of putting it all together on the playing field, which is the last step. Obviously, Alabama, Clemson have done an amazing job and kept it between themselves the last 4 years. But I think any Ohio State fan who has dyed in the wool and has supported the team for 10 or 20 or 30 years understands there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. But all you can ever ask for is that your staff and your program is in position. I mean, you're not picked to finish 4th in the division this year. You're picked to finish 1st or 2nd, and that's where you want to be every year at this time.
Yeah, but I'll say on the other side, too, that there are people that are concerned with, the uncertainty. I mean, new coach, new quarterback, everything there. A lot of people, we're not that far removed from winning the Big Ten, beating Michigan, getting to the Rose Bowl. Those were the goals at that point. That's out the door, at least with where the program is now. Urban Meyer lost 9 games in 7 years. We all joke, what's going to happen to this fan base when Ryan Day's team loses their first game? Because it's not a common occurrence under the Urban Meyer regime at that point. But I do think that fans are cautiously optimistic. They see a roster that's coming back with a lot of talent. I mean, the team is back-to-back Big Ten champions. I think they see a schedule without that elite Power 5 out-of-conference opponent on there. I don't think that maybe that they're really looking at the conference schedule enough to see what a bear Penn State and Michigan's going to be. A couple of these little runs that they have there, that their carryover game or the crossover games from the West are Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Northwestern. That's about as tough of a draw as you can get. So, and with everything being said, I think that people are cautiously optimistic, but in some ways, I think there's still some people, just because of the uncertainty, that are just holding out, fully pushing their chips all the way in at this point.
Do you think that the angst amongst Ohio State fans, and again, I'm just picking on a certain group because many are reasonable and they're good fans and they understand how difficult it is to win the whole thing. And they also understand that it's selective, that they could have been in the running for the Final Four and been in the Final Four the last 2 years. That if you took a typical landscape of athletic competition where the championships were and the competition was more spread out, meaning if we went back to football of the 1980s, 90s, and 2000s, when these dynasties were extremely short-lived, like a team won one back-to-back, rarely happened, and the national championships were spread out amongst 8 to 10 to 12 schools, not just this Alabama Clemson dominance, and then making Ohio State and Georgia and others just feel like, if it's put in that light as a second tier, that it would be more forgiving and more understandable and more accepted that we won our national championship this decade just because like 7 or 8 other schools did. But this Clemson Alabama thing has just made it driven Ohio State fans a little bit crazy.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think part of the issue is that we have such an unlevel playing field right now. Do you play 8 league games? Do you play 9 league games? Do you play all FBS opponents? Do you play an FCS opponent? If you're some SEC teams, do you play 2 FCS opponents? There's so much unequal, rules in terms of where the conferences are right now that it's hard to sit there when you have a system basically where you need to win your conference. I mean, we have seen the SEC get 2 teams in there, but you need to win your conference. So there is going to be a lot of angst out there when you have the Big Ten, which may be a little bit ahead of the curve or behind the curve, depending on how you look at it, with 9 league games, no FCS opponents. I mean, I guess there are 3 on the schedule across the entirety of the Big Ten, whereas it's like 15 in like some of the other conferences. So I think until a lot of that gets set up, we're going to have a lot of that angst out there because not everybody's playing with the same deck.
Yeah, I agree with what he's saying. I think a lot of cases it becomes an apples to oranges comparison. How many ranked teams did you play? How many FCS teams did you play? How many conference games did you play? And so on and so forth. And there is no easy way to compare ACC to SEC. I will say this. I've got another survey coming up looking at schedules, and you have schools like Ohio State and Iowa in particular and a few others that are going to play like 6 ranked teams this year. And then you have Clemson that's only going to play 1 or 2. And to me, that's much more important than worrying about, oh, they played 8 league games or they played 9 league games. I think it's Power 5 is what the barometer should be. Everybody should be playing a minimum. Anybody who wants to be considered for the championship should be playing a minimum of 10 Power 5 games out of 12. That's not too much to ask for. I know the SEC teams play 8 conference games, and most of them play at least 1 non-conference game. And their argument's going to be, well, our conference games are tougher than your conference games. Whatever, that's how you feel. That's how you feel. I don't know. There's computers that dictate what schedule strength is, and Alabama, even playing 8 conference games in Louisville last year, still had a better strength of schedule than a lot of other teams did that were in this competition. But I don't know. There's no one size fits all scenario, because every year the landscape is different. Who the teams play and who they lose to, who they beat. 2 years ago, Alabama was praised for playing Florida State. Turns out Florida State had one of its worst years in the last 50 years. So you just don't know how it's going to be when you schedule these games. And again, it's all apples to oranges, and you do have to use some of the human element in there to figure it out.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Kevin will get to you in just a second. Just a little promotional break here, 9 o'clock Eastern time every week with these gentlemen and others. Tony Gerderman from the Ozone in particular, Buckeye Claire Crawford. We do it up big with Ohio State football talk again, Wednesday night, 9 o'clock Eastern time. So don't be selfish. Don't just, bask in it yourself. Go out there and get on social media. Bring those folks in as well, family and friends. Kevin, your thoughts?
I was just going to say, I agree on, when Florida State and Alabama played each other, but there's a much better opportunity. There's a much better chance that's going to be a good game than when you're scheduling the Citadel or Savannah State or East Tennessee State or some of these other schools. I could beat the drum forever and ever and ever about just the disproportionate scheduling out there and this belief that, the SEC needs to have these lesser non-con games because of how difficult that conference is. You know what? Arkansas is garbage right now. Ole Miss is garbage right now. Vandy wins a game or two. Now I'm not going to be welcome in the South again. I'm not welcome in Wisconsin, and now I'm not going to be welcome in the South.
You're boxing yourself in, Kevin.
I know.
Geographically.
I just don't really. I don't think that they have much of a leg to stand on there anymore. In terms of, the SEC in particular has really kind of risen to being a couple team league, and then the middle is way down from where it used to be. The middle used to be a lot better when your Mississippi's and your Mississippi States and some of these other schools were playing at a higher level. But now, it's Alabama, it's Georgia. To a lesser extent, a lot of people are in love with LSU. I think Texas A&M certainly has some things going on right now. But, Florida is going to get mentioned in there. But beyond that, I think if you look from 6 down in that league, there's not a lot to really be that excited about.
Yeah, my scheduling formula takes the process out of the hands of the schools and puts it in the hands of a committee and gives them a metric that they have to hit. The metric being that they have to schedule 2 Power 5 games out of either the 3 or 4 non-conference, and those 2 teams need to have played to a 500 record combined the year before. That means everybody has the same schedule. Now, of course, you can't forecast how good teams are going to be and be accurate all the time. For that particular season, you can only base it on the year prior results, but you can create an equitable schedule, non-conference schedule, if you take it out of the school's hands. And to Kevin's point, for the last 2 years, Alabama's played Louisville and Duke as their big non-conference game. And people will argue and defend them by saying, well, they didn't know how good Louisville was going to be 5 years ago. Well, yeah, Louisville's been better with Lamar Jackson and had 8-4 type of teams. That's what we think of when we think Louisville. But Louisville's never a giant. They're never great. They're never Oklahoma, Ohio State, anybody like that. Ditto Duke. Duke is never a top 10 team. They're at best a 7-5, 6-16. That's what they are. So Alabama scheduling those 2 teams is ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree with you. Duke's had some ups and downs, mostly downs. And Louisville, that program, it just kind of, they have one great year and then about 4 or 5 kind of down years. And, they obviously had Lamar Jackson and all that, but have not had any kind of consistent maintained success. Ohio State does not have a Power 5 non-conference opponent this year. The TCU deal was supposed to be a home-and-home deal, and that got bought out for a very lucrative game at the Cowboys Stadium, and Ohio State replaced it with Miami of Ohio. They are playing Cincinnati, and as Kevin mentioned, their crossover schedule last year, by comparison, was Minnesota, Purdue, and Nebraska, none of whom were all that great. This year, Nebraska, Northwestern, and Wisconsin, and at least on paper, Northwestern could be a ranked team. The other 2 are certainly in potential to be ranked teams. So they have upgraded their schedule, even though it was out of their hands with the crossover games at the very least. But, again, scheduling this is where these schools make their money, is with these non-conference games. And Ohio State always has to have 7 home games because each home game is worth $8 to $10 million or even more than that now. So I don't know. Again, you're trying to balance covering your athletic department budget with giving your football team enough challenges to where they'll be a great team at the end of the year, but not too many tough challenges, because if you lose a game, you can be out of the mix really quickly. So I don't know. It's a fine balance. You're trying to serve three masters there, and some schools have found a way to do it, and some schools struggle with how to do it. But I don't know. I don't know that there is a perfect formula. And if you have a team that makes the playoff in any given year, I think that is a pretty high honor. People complain about Notre Dame making it last year. Well, they were 12-0, I believe. So I'm not sure how much better than that, what they would have gained by playing a 13th game. I don't know. So people say, oh, it would have been a conference championship game. If you take their 12 games and plot them out against Ohio State's 13 games and go crossways like this, at the bottom, you're going to have Ohio State's game against Tulane. If you look at it that way, that was a meaningless 13th game. So I think the schedules, their 12 games against Ohio State's best 12 games, pretty comparable. Tulane meaningless.
But
think about that. Go ahead, Kevin.
I was going to say, I don't think it's a matter of so much of them adding another marquee game I think it's just another opportunity to lose. You come out, you play flat, you're not there. I mean, the likelihood that you're going to play flat in December is minimal at best, 0 probably. But it's another opportunity for the ball to bounce a weird way, for something stupid to happen, for another team just to come out just completely jacked up, for Iowa to beat Ohio State, for Purdue to beat Ohio State. You just never know. And I just didn't personally like that they were able to get away. They're this pseudo partner of the ACC, yet they're not part of the ACC. Make them play Clemson. I mean, seriously. I mean, if you're going to be pseudo ACC, well, get in a little bit deeper. Keep your NBC money. I don't care about that, whatever. But if you've got this every sport but football, but we're going to play 3 or 4 ACC games, just get in the pool a little bit further and play a December game. I just don't think that's necessarily right. That's not a. I think if we were sitting there and if it was with BYU being independent, if BYU were a Power 5 team and would sit there and play 12 games and not be in a league, I'd have the same issue with them. I'd have the same issue with anybody at that point. So, I just think it's an opportunity for you to lose another game because you just never know. It's hard to get up for 13 games. It's hard to get up for 12 games, but I didn't like it.
So to take Kevin's point and extend it and apply it as he started to last season, Notre Dame has joined the ACC in every other sport. Had they joined the ACC in football, that Clemson-Notre Dame national semifinal game would have been the ACC championship game. That's where the game should have been played. Meanwhile, we have Oklahoma and Ohio State who have track records and resumes that are basically indistinguishable. Ohio State has the worst loss, but they've got better wins. They both have bad defenses, but Ohio State's isn't awful. They are very comparable teams. They both went 13-1. They both won a major conference. Ohio State most likely won the better conference, still got left out. Meanwhile, Notre Dame makes it at 12-0, and Notre Dame's schedule's difficult, but their difficult scheduling didn't come to fruition last year because Virginia Tech, who's usually good, was awful. USC's, who's usually good, was awful. Florida State, who's usually good, was awful. Stanford, who's usually really good, was good, but not as good as they typically are. They were 8-4 good. So Notre Dame, outside of Michigan, and they played that game at night at home to open the season, never played anybody really good. To their credit, they won all the games, but what is typically a daunting schedule turned out to be a pretty mediocre schedule, and they got to sit at home, watch everybody else play a 13th game.
Yeah, I was looking for my Sagarin ratings from last year, and I don't know whether his formula is any different or better than anybody else's, but, I don't recall people saying, oh, Notre Dame played a crap schedule. I think they played a representative schedule. I mean, they may have been ranked. They may have been ranked behind or ahead. I wish I had it here because I know it's very illuminating. Ohio State and Oklahoma were pretty comparable, I think, in strength of schedule, and it helped them obviously that they got to play Texas, whereas Ohio State played Northwestern, which was 8-4 or whatever, 7 and I don't know, 8-4 maybe the day that they played each other. So yeah, so yeah, I think it's again, there's just no way to ever in this sport without uprooting a lot of tradition that we're ever going to have an apples to oranges comparison. I mean, Clemson could very well go 13-0 this year and walk backwards into the playoff without playing maybe one or two ranked teams. And you're going to have a major conference champion 12-1 from one of these other conferences that has lost a regular season game but came back and won their conference championship and played, again, I don't know how Sagarin would view it or whoever, will do these computer rankings, a schedule that's much better, much tougher than Clemson played and still not get in the playoffs. So, I mean, I can guarantee you that's going to happen. I mean, we know that. I'm just, hey, I found it. I found my handy dandy USA Today Rose Bowl. And there's the Sagarin ratings right there.
Well, somebody better be a fan of Syracuse and Dino Babers this year because I think that's about. I don't even know if they're on Clemson's schedule to be honest, but
they are.
I mean, yeah. That's the game right there.
This just in, according to Sagarin, Ohio State played the number 40 schedule, and Notre Dame played the number 42 schedule. Now they played 12 games, and Ohio State played 13, but boy, there's not a whole heck of a lot of difference there. And they were 12-0, and Ohio State was 12-1. I don't see where Notre Dame lost to Purdue or a team anywhere near as bad as Purdue. So, again, Alabama 44, Clemson 48. Notre Dame had a better schedule on paper than Alabama or Clemson. And people said they didn't deserve to be in the playoff. They played the same schedule and didn't lose a game. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll agree to disagree. I'm not gonna. I mean, I don't know. I mean, between the Sagarin, I mean, is that we're getting into stuff above my pay grade, whether it's the the ELO chess or whatever, adjustment on the rankings and whatnot. I mean, and there seems to be some sort of variation between the two different numbers of what the old BCS looked at and where he liked to have it for where he would have liked to have had the rankings in terms of his computer. But, with that being said, I don't know. I mean, I'm not crazy about the ACC schedule right now. I mean, Clemson is,
we're going to find out at the end of the year. Clemson better be 70 on this list and hopefully get penalized for it, or everybody's going to do, well, how can you do? I mean, they play South Carolina. I mean, which I guess is on a swing backwards, to come back up. But what's their other big game? Are they at Texas A&M? Yeah,
that game's at home.
Yeah,
we played them on the road last year.
Yeah, and there's only one other ranked ACC team at Syracuse. So, this is kind of Miami could be in the rankings at some point. So we'll see. But
they don't play them unless they both play
potentially in the championship game. Sure. I guess.
Yep.
I got to figure if whoever they play in the championship game will be ranked, but
Well, I don't know about that. There's a pretty good run there in the Coastal Division.
Last year.
Pitt went 7-7 last year, and they played in a conference championship game. This is a regular thing in the Coastal Division. Marginal teams making if Virginia, who the ACC media voted as their champion this year, if they win it, that'll be a 7th division winner out of 7 teams in 7 years. They will all have shared equally over the past 7 years.
That's parity.
No, that's meh, is what that is.
That's not mediocrity.
That's meh.
It is. In that case, it is. I think what's happening in the Big Ten Western Division is similar in parity, but it's a higher quality of play. Not that it's elite. Nobody's elite yet, but what Minnesota's building, what Northwestern has built recently, what Nebraska's building. Wisconsin's already there. I don't want to say that they're there, that they've arrived. Obviously, they're 7-5 last year, but they're usually a really good 10-win type team. And then Iowa as well. It's a 2.0 or 3.0 version of the ACC Coastal Division. Is what it is.